guys, it's Nina, and today we're doing this. It's been a while and a lot has happened since I last posted. I moved in with my boyfriend recently, and that was going to be my excuse as to why I haven't posted in a while, but in reality, we moved in together in July and I definitely could have made a video. I did start a new full-time job in VFX last October, and that has taken up a lot of my time, and I mean a lot of my time. There's a lot of overtime in VFX. But in all honesty, the pandemic is still going strong here in Montreal, and I've spent a lot of my free time with friends and family, virtually or otherwise. Anyway, I whipped up this video for you guys that I did start back in July, but I finally finished it and I have it here for you. I stuck to what you all voted for in my community tab, and so without further ado, Sweet Vicious. Sweet Vicious is an MTV show that aired back in 2016. It only got one season and it ended on a cliffhanger. Don't let that stop you from watching it though, because it's so good and it covers really important topics. Speaking of which, I'm going to issue a trigger warning here because it does go deeply into the topics of R-word and SA. The show follows the main character Jules when she decides to take justice into her own hands when the school is doing nothing to protect victims of SA. She becomes a vigilante and attacks those that have been accused and never convicted. If you have never seen it yet and this sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend you go and watch it because going forward there will be tons of spoilers in my video. One day, Ophelia, the show's second main character, catches Jules attacking a guy in an alley. She then finds Jules' necklace and decides to track her down and return it. She also just wants to find her out of curiosity. Like, who's this girl beating up a guy in an alley? Or a person, I guess. But she finds out it's a girl. Eventually, the two team up and they take this on together. As the show goes on, we find out that Jules is actually one of the victims. Let's dive deeper into the characters.
Hello, this is Jules. Sorry. What in the f was that?
So Jules is surprisingly a goody-goody sorority girl. She doesn't even swear when she's in a panic.
Okay, but gosh darn it, no police!
She has this adorable and unexpected catchphrase.
Rats? Did you say rats? Rats, there's no name. Rats.
But of course, she has this dark side fueled by her anger against her attacker, which causes her to become the vigilante in disguise. Over the summer, she gets trained in hand-to-hand combat and then goes after R-words. There are moments in the beginning of the season where she's actually kind of scary and aggressive. For example, when Ophelia comes to return the necklace, she pushes her down some stairs and then threatens her at knife point. We quickly discover that this is an act or a switch that gets flipped because she's inherently a sweet and nice girl. We can see this in a scene in episode 1 when she almost gets killed by the guy she goes after, and Ophelia saves her by accidentally killing him. Her saying, "This? No, we've never done this before," in such a whiny voice is a very funny contrast to her badassery. Now, that murder, in self-defense, becomes a major plot point, so don't worry, I'll get back to that. We slowly start to discover what happened to her to cause this darkness within. In the first episode, we find out that she's on academic probation and she's keeping it from her friends. This points us to the idea that something more is going on with her than simply wanting to seek justice. There is also a scene with her and her best friend Kennedy that really becomes awkward when Kennedy's boyfriend Nate shows up. We later find out that Nate is actually the one that committed the crime against her, and it's confirmed that she has trauma. In episode 2, they do this whole sort of dream sequence recap that is really awesome and clarifying at the same time.
Basically, I was last year by Nate, your boyfriend, and the school did literally nothing. I mean, there were such a-holes. So I went home for the summer and I trained really hard, and I came back as, I don't know, I guess I'm like a vigilante. Ugh, that word is so masculine. Will Powell and Tommy Cope, both my handiwork. And I was gonna beat up that Carter Fisher, you know, that baseball alum. But then this girl, Ophelia, oh, you know Ophelia, she's the weed dealer from the record store. She turned up when I was knocked out and killed Carter. Such a mess.
At first, it seems like she really could actually be saying these things, especially because she's so unhinged. I kind of wish she did actually blurt it out like that, but it would have ruined the whole plot and point of the show. It was a little bit of satisfaction for the audience, though, to actually have her say exactly what was on her mind, even if it wasn't actually real. We also discover that her dad is not only a cop, but an ex-homicide detective when her and Ophelia go to bury the body and they start cutting off his hands and toes to get rid of fingerprints. Between the beginning of the show and now, Jules meets this guy named Tyler, at first at a party and then second at a bar that Ophelia and Jules go to regroup after the murder. I'll get into that more in the relationship section, but in a cruel twist of fate, the guy they murdered is actually Tyler's stepbrother. Talk about bad karma. In this same episode, we find out that Jules is going to group therapy sessions. In one of the sessions, she has a moment of realization that what she's doing as a vigilante is not actually helping the victims if they don't know that it's happening. So she makes sure that the next person that she helps can see the guy physically beaten up so that they know that someone's looking out for them if the school is not. In episode 3, we dive deeper into how her own attack has affected her. She continues to have nightmares and learns that taking out her anger in this way as a vigilante is actually not helping her, even though it's satisfying to get revenge in a way. The things that used to be so fun for her have become so trivial through the eyes of a victim, and she takes this out on her friends.
I don't care about the stupid paddle, okay? It's so trivial, Kennedy. We're painting a house because someone put maple syrup on you. I mean, like, what are we, 5 years old?
In episode 5, we see just how cruel Nate is when he talks to Jules in the middle of the night and belittles the assault by calling it just cheating as if it was a mistake that they made together. It was also sort of a threat implying that he would portray it in this way to Kennedy, and that's what he actually ends up doing. Jules breaks down crying, and the fact that she's trying not to make a sound to wake anyone up is even more heartbreaking. In episode 6, she's fed up with not being able to be with Tyler because of her trauma, and so she confronts Nate, puts her hand on his mouth, and lays everything out on the table. But then Tyler pops in after Nate leaves and sees her breaking down, and for some reason assumes that she has a thing for Nate. They end up breaking up. In episode 7, flashbacks to the incident show that it can be a friend and someone that you trust. Jules asks him to lie in his bed because she's intoxicated and can't find her own way home, and she trusts that he's not going to do anything because they're friends. She didn't at all think that he would do something like this. They were all part of the same friend group before this happened. We also see that Jules actually does try to report the incident. She goes to the school clinic to get a kit, and she goes to the school counselor, but of course the school's counselor tries to victim blame her. She even tries to pin it on the idea that she feels guilty that she cheated with her best friend's boyfriend, and mentions the fact that Nate is a high-profile student at the school.
I think that I was assaulted.
You think or you know?
Peter pointed out that this character is necessary for the audience to realize the perspective of a victim and how wrong it is to suggest these things. Because of Jules' anger resurfacing, she takes it all out on Brady, one of the worst offenders, and almost beats him half to death. And in episode 9, after finally talking it out with Kennedy, she's ready to report her incident, and with confidence. The line of questioning in the proceedings is very much victim blaming and leading the witness, and it's so frustrating. The counselor shows us a picture, and she says, I haven't met many CEOs that dress like this, but she's wearing a blouse and a skirt. That's what people wear. Come on, Lane. I love how feisty Jules is being while answering these questions, though.
Did you say no?
I just told you that I said no.
She's standing up for herself, and she's not letting them walk all over her.
But you didn't try to stop him.
Yes, I did.
She literally just said she did. I do like how supportive the sorority is, though. Nate gets a guilty verdict, and the girls get really confused because they've beaten up so many people under the notion that the school won't help. But then the verdict gets turned over. Of course it does. Jules puts that into perspective with this one question.
Sorry, so you're saying that, the President Mays, who has never met me, knows nothing about me or what I've been through, has decided that Nate Griffin is innocent.
The character of Jules may be a lot to take in, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's see how Ophelia fits into all this.
Ophelia, drop the weed!
Ophelia is a cool, down-to-earth druggie. She has a perfect GPA but doesn't go to any classes. She sells drugs on her free time, and she has a lot of free time. She's also very tech-savvy. Funnily enough, she's going to get kicked out of school for not going to classes, even though she has perfect grades in all of her classes. She also has rich but absent parents. O sees Jules in episode 1 when she's running away from the campus police for drug possession. She decides to look into the vigilante purely out of curiosity and easily finds Jules with the necklace. Then the kick down the stairs and the knife threatening happens. Ophelia isn't exactly afraid of Jules though, so she puts tracking software in her phone that she grabbed while she was held at knife point. She follows Jules to the garage where things weren't going exactly to plan, and then, murders Carter. The scene was so incredibly dry and point blank that it was hilarious, and then she very realistically vomits. Shit gets kicked up a notch. They put the body in the trunk of a car and they make their way to a bar to regroup, like I said earlier. This leads to one of my favorite scenes of the show where they're driving in the car with the body of a dead R-word in the trunk, and then they start belting out Defying Gravity from Wicked. This show is very good at mixing humor with serious topics. Anyway, back at the bar, Ophelia makes this Batman joke and reference when she's talking about maybe teaming up together.
So what do we do next?
Well, there is no we. I work alone.
Okay, first off, that is something Batman so would have said. And secondly, that sure worked well for you tonight.
And then eventually they do team up. At first out of necessity because they, murdered someone together. But then in episode 2, Ophelia overhears a girl at the police station talking about how she hasn't gotten justice in her own case. And that really fuels a fire in Ophelia's derriere. Oh yeah, and they're at the police station to pick up the car that got towed, the one with the body in the back. But everything works out there because Jules' dad is a cop. And like I said, that's all good, and Ophelia gets fired up about their next target. O then takes it upon herself to get access to his phone. They discover that he's on the path to the NBA without any consequences for what he had done to this girl. Throughout this episode, we start to see that Ophelia is having PTSD for the murder of Carter. In episode 4, we dive deeper into her backstory and family life when their target becomes a sorority. Kappa is performing terrible hazing in their rush week that consists of SA against the same sex. We find out that Ophelia is actually a Kappa legacy and she decides to go undercover to nail him. We also discover that she doesn't like Nickelback.
I have saved countless people from the irreparable mistake that is Nickelback.
Which is a major character flaw in my opinion, but while Jules is prettying her up, she makes this great joke.
Yes. Yes, 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 girl. Ow!
I'm sorry, you're being a asshole and I didn't know how to stop it.
We learn that she has issues with her parents because of differences in mindset, but when she pretends to join the sorority, her mom gets excited, and O actually starts to bond with her mom. But sadly, Ophelia finds out that her mom is not actually liking her for who she is, and she also finds out that her mom is one of the reasons that this sorority is doing this awful hazing in the first place, because she was, one of the founders. We even find out that the entire Kappa house is bugged and they're running a hazing site. This fuels their fire to take them down. After taking down the sorority, Ophelia wants to continue the bond that she started to have with her mom, but her mom kind of wants nothing to do with her again. In episode 5, with new fire in her eyes, Ophelia decides to go undercover as a potential victim when they find out that a guy is running an SA operation out of a ride-sharing business. It's a very bad idea and she nearly does not get away. She's brought to a different location than they thought, and they find out that it's actually a 2-guy operation. Jules saves her, but she gets a taste of what it might feel like to be an actual victim. When they try to go after these 2 guys again, it doesn't go to plan, and Ophelia actually gets caught on top of one of them on camera with a cut on her arm. The campus goes into lockdown. During the lockdown, she decides to go rogue and actually attacks the guy to give him a similar scar to basically frame him, which I thought was pretty clever. Keep in mind, he's an R-word. In episode 8, Harris, Ophelia's best friend, finds out that the 2 girls are vigilantes and he gets implicated. In episode 9, Ophelia decides to go to the DA's office to turn herself in so that Harris doesn't have to keep this on his conscience, showing that she's a very good friend, even though she was quite intoxicated while doing it. Harris and Jules stop her. Speaking of, let's talk about Harris next.
Just tell her how I feel.
With your body on the dance floor.
Or with words in a quiet hallway.
First things first, he's Nico. Now that we got that out of the way, Harris is a hilarious law student. Harris is best friends with Ophelia and he is protective, concerned for, and caring toward her. In the first episode, when Ophelia gets busted for a joint, he comes to bail her out acting like her lawyer.
Step away from my client.
Later on, we find out that he's trying to get into the law journal on campus, and he's struggling to find essay topics. While Jules and Ophelia are attempting to dispose of Carter's body, a frat house is having this scavenger hunt, and so the police on campus are on high alert. While Harris is walking down the street with some froyo, he gets profiled. Because of this incident, he decides to write his essay on race issues on campus. While he's explaining this to Ophelia, though, she's kind of distracted and not really paying attention, which is kind of annoying considering how good of a friend he is to her. In episode 3, 2 of Jules' sorority sisters are high on shrooms, and Kennedy asks Jules to take care of them, and because Jules and Ophelia have this takedown plan, Ophelia asks Harris to take care of these 2 girls, even though he has his law journal essay to write. I am so glad that at the end of the episode he claps back at Ophelia for this and doesn't allow her to walk all over him.
Ophelia, don't. You're a horrible employee. But you're an even worse friend.
In episode 4, Harris gets pigeonholed into race-based articles, and so he pitches the idea of writing an article about the vigilante. As you can imagine, this becomes a problem for the girls. He starts questioning the past vigilante victims and starts piecing together what they all have in common. In episode 5, he actually teams up with Barton to crack the case. Barton is the campus police officer, and he is actually genuinely a nice guy, and he actually cares for the victims, and he really wants to help. Barton gets fired for bringing stuff forward to the school. And at the end of this episode, he finds the wall in the girls' bathroom. And so he has, a list of potential victims of the vigilante. And because Harris teams up with Barton, he starts to piece it together even more because he realizes that Ophelia probably knows the vigilante because she saw them attacking the guy in the alley. And at Tyler's art show, I'll get to that later, he finds out that the necklace that she found was Jules's. He then pitches to O that Jules is the vigilante, and she convinces him that she's way too small. But a few minutes later, he's not deterred because Tyler calls her a ninja.
We don't need that pocket knife. We got Jules. She's a little ninja.
What?
No. He's making a joke because she's so small. It's a hilarious joke. Don't make another one, but it's a great joke.
In episode 7, he finds out that his article is actually not going to be published because the school is trying to keep it hidden, and so he decides to publish it on his own on a public forum online. Because of this, he gets kicked off the law journal. In episode 8, Harris says this most profound thing.
Cats are garbage, we know this.
Yes, we do. Barton and Harris put a name on the bathroom wall to bait the vigilante because they want to be able to catch them. The guy that they put on the wall has an accusation against him that got thrown out because the girl contacted him afterward asking for her bracelet back. Brady, the accused, keeps mementos of his sexual encounters in a box under his bed. Barton tries to protect him/tail him to uncover the vigilante, but he's not that good at it. Harris succeeds and he catches Ophelia and Jules fighting Brady. And finally in episode 10, Harris is trying to get into a different law journal, but they don't want to talk about the why of the vigilante because they are funded by the city, which is mostly funded by the school because of how the economy works and all. So basically, they want to talk about the vigilante, but they don't want to talk about the reason behind the vigilante and the reason why the vigilante is doing what they're doing. So they're essentially protecting the wrong party. In the end, obviously Harris finds out about Ophelia and Jules and at first is very angry, but he eventually comes around to the idea after seeing the injustice. He actually wants to help them out, and to do so, he actually joins this journal so that he could be the man on the inside. Overall, Harris is a great friend. He's very smart and level-headed. In comparison to that, let's talk about Jules' best friend, Kennedy.
Have you heard of the lifestyle brand Yes Girl?
The site about juice and skincare products.
Oh, yeah, but it is so much more than that. I really think you might like it. It might help you harness your inner goddess.
So like I said, Kennedy is Jules' best friend, and she appears as though she's like just a normal, nice best friend. But there are some things that happen in the show that really irk me about her. When she notices that Jules starts to hang out with Ophelia more, she invites Ophelia over under the pretense of buying drugs. She is then very judgmental. She doesn't like the fact that Jules is hanging out more with Ophelia and keeping secrets from her. Because Nate is Kennedy's boyfriend and Jules' attacker, Jules doesn't feel like she can go to Kennedy for support. This is why Jules starts distancing herself from Kennedy and relies more on Ophelia. I don't think that Kennedy handles this very well, in my opinion. Instead of trying harder to reach out to her friend that is clearly in distress, she just gets annoyed that Jules is not how she used to be. Kennedy is pretty boring and one-dimensional throughout the show until we see more of her demons at the end, which personally, I don't find truly justifiable. She has boy problems that seem so minimal that make you just want to go like, break up with him then. But to be fair, this mindset comes from the bias and privy knowledge that we have of what Jules is currently going through. This idea comes back in episode 4 when the girls are supposed to paint a statue, but the sorority decides to go to the frat house and prank them instead. Kennedy is so upset that Jules won't go into the frat house with her to steal something that they've always planned to steal throughout their years at school. But from our perspective, it's an overreaction, especially through the eyes of Jules. We know that Jules doesn't want to go into the frat house because it brings back bad memories. But from Kennedy's eyes, Jules is not doing the thing that they've talked about doing for so long and also not telling her why. Under normal circumstances, it would be upsetting that your friend is not telling you why they won't do the thing that you've planned to do for years. But Kennedy did not try nearly hard enough to figure out why Jules is suddenly acting this way. In episode 5, Kennedy cuts Ophelia off with different advice about Tyler. Her advice is not all that horrible, but it just really irks me that she had to cut Ophelia off to give it.
You say that you're going to take...
I think you need to give him some space.
Kennedy comes off to me like a character that represents Jules' old life and how far she is detached from it. The audience feels as though all the topics that the sorority covers are so trivial and like unimportant, when it's only because we're actually seeing it through Jules' after-trauma ideology on the world. This is reiterated in episode 4 when Ophelia says,
"You only see the world through your damaged Jules goggles."
Even though this might be the reason for Kennedy's character, she kind of sucks overall because she clearly sees that Jules is going through something and decides to ignore it. She goes so far as to tell Nate, I hope she's over whatever it is she had to get over. Kennedy should have realized that something was going wrong and dropped everything. It's so clear that Jules is going through something. And when Jules told her that Nate R-worded her, everything should have clicked into place and made sense considering how Jules was acting after the incident. But instead, she didn't believe her and ushered her away. In episode 9, she finally comes to her senses when Ophelia talks to her and snaps her out of it. She goes to find Jules and talks to her and tells her, "I wasn't ready to face it. It's not about you." Dude, I get that it's hard to accept that your boyfriend cheated on you by R-wording your best friend, but imagine what Jules is going through, the person who had it happen to her. That should be the priority. Mourn your boyfriend afterwards. And even after somewhat redeeming herself, she makes it all about her again in episode 10. She wants the vigilante to get revenge on Nate under the guise of justice for Jules, but really she wants revenge for what Nate did to her.
Right, this is about Jules.
Of course it's about Jules.
I do understand that it has to be difficult for her as well, and we find out later that she's racked with guilt for missing Nate, having been with him for so many years. But still, at this moment, your friend needs you to be there for her, especially since you haven't been there for her for all these months. Anyway, Jules allows her to realize that she needs to mourn the loss and that she needs closure. Considering how Jules constantly is reaching out to Kennedy when she notices that she's struggling with this, it really shows that Jules is a much better friend than Kennedy ever was. Jules has obviously gone through a traumatic experience, yet she could put that aside to be there for her friend, while Kennedy wanted to ignore it and tuck it away and be blissfully ignorant while her friend suffered. Moving on to some nicer characters.
You, have a... I don't want to touch it, but there's a condom in your hair. Yep.
No, get it out, get it out, get it out!
I'm not touching it.
Tyler, just man up and get it out.
Tyler is sweet, caring, attentive, and artsy. He is a cutie, and he becomes Jules' love interest. Unfortunately, the girls murdered his stepbrother, and so throughout the show, he's trying to find him and dealing with the turmoil that comes with that. In episode 2, he's even cutesy texting Jules while they're cutting up his brother in the cemetery. It's kind of sad. As a significant other, it's your job to be there for them when your partner's brother goes missing. But Jules can't do that because she's the reason that he's missing. The girls have Carter's phone, and using Ophelia's hacker skills, they text Tyler to tell him that Carter's in Canada snowboarding to distract him from the fact that he's actually dead. Tyler eventually susses out his brother's apartment and finds a snowboard in the closet. That makes him go like, I thought he was snowboarding in Canada. He starts to talk to the police about Carter to try to figure it out. They discover that his phone was last detected in the cemetery. What's worse is Carter is due to report for trial about allegations against him, and people are taking it out on Tyler, assuming that he's covering for him. Tyler is approached by one of Carter's victims, and she basically shoots the messenger. In episode 7, Tyler discovers that the snowboarding picture that the girls sent him was actually a face taken from a profile picture on Facebook, and so he realizes that the photo is fake. He's slowly coming to realize that there's something really going wrong here, but again, Jules is unable to be there for him because she wants to distract him from it. He decides to finally file a missing persons report. After Jules breaks up with him in episode 6 during the lockdown, Tyler pours himself into finding his brother. In episode 8, we see Tyler talking to the cop again about finding his brother while he's watching Jules tail Brady. You can tell that they both want to be together, and I so root for them, but it's also like, how are they ever going to be together considering?
Nate, you ready for the game Friday? You know it? Yeah, you're the man. Go Wolverine! Woo!
Nate is Kennedy's boyfriend and Jules' assailant. Looking back on the first scene that we see him in, and knowing what we know about what he's done, this scene is so much more sinister. He acts like nothing happened. Throughout the show, he comes off as a guy that may be super ignorant to what he had done to Jules and what it meant for her. Don't get me wrong, he's definitely a douchebag, but there was definitely some doubt that he fully understood the extent of what he had done, even though he should have. In episode 6, he shows up at the vinyl store where they're all locked down, clearly showing that he still thinks that he's in Jules' good graces. Maybe he's just an idiot, but in the end, we discover that it's not the first time that he's done this. And after this scene in episode 10,
these girls walk around in these tight skirts asking for it, and then you screw them and they get mad.
We really find out that he has the mindset and the cruelty of an R-word.
9 times out of 10. These girls want it.
He is awful. Now let's talk about someone that has flaws, but is redeemable.
Is Mackenzie really?
Is Mackenzie what? I'm so sorry. I completely lost track of time at the library.
You've missed 3 meetings this semester.
Mackenzie is meticulous and invasive. She is sort of the lead of the sorority, and the show portrays her as a little scary.
Oh,
I know how you feel.
The way she pops in here out of nowhere with the whoosh sound making her seem creepy. She's also made to speak a mile a minute.
Getting extra credit for meeting Leslie Garner for what class? Business strategy? I want extra credit.
And with strange vocabulary.
If he sends one more bouquet, I'm gonna have him nervy be down.
But in episode 9, when she discovers what happened to Jules, she feels extremely guilty for letting this happen to his sister, and you could see that in her face. She feels extremely at fault, and she decides to instate a rule that in my opinion should have been there in the first place.
I'm gonna institute a new rule. No Zeta sister leaves a party unless every Zeta is accounted for.
I'm pretty sure most sororities have that rule, but at least she owns up to her mistakes. Someone else that has a redemption arc is Miles.
Miles. Are you here for that new One Direction vinyl?
No, I'm Zayn all the way, baby. I got your text.
Miles is Nate's best friend since high school. Throughout the show, he seems really nice and cool and not at all like a jerk, to be honest. But when the allegations come out against Nate, we're not sure who he's gonna side with. There is this scene where he's talking shit about Jules in a coffee shop and then Kennedy confronts him.
And Miles, you might want to take a closer look at your best friend. He's not who you think he is.
But after that, he appears very conflicted. In episode 8, you see that Nate's coach is saying that he's going to take care of everything, and you can see Miles is not half bad. You can see that he's not fully on board with protecting Nate and validating his story. When Nate tries to talk to him and justify his actions, Miles actually confronts him about what he had done and doesn't automatically side with him. This was refreshing to see someone stand up to their best friend instead of automatically siding with them because of some stupid rule like bros before hoes. Because of the turmoil caused by his best friend being an R-word, Miles gets high. Ophelia had provided him the weed in that interaction and finds out that he had a falling out with Nate. The girls want Miles' help to get some dirt on Nate when the school again dismisses Jules' case. Miles tells them, albeit while high, to find Shelby. This is how they discover that Jules was not Nate's first victim. When Miles wakes up from his drug-induced sleep, he finds a letter from the vigilante. They ask him to talk to Nate and essentially get his confession on camera. During this confession, Nate's true self is revealed, and it's ugly. Overall, I think Miles is a good guy that at first was in denial about Nate, but he quickly snaps out of it a lot quicker than Kennedy, for example. On to a more lighthearted characters actually.
That's it. He's cut the power.
We're all gonna die. Could you two pull it together, please? No one cut any power if the lights are still on.
Gabby and Fiona are two smaller characters in Jules' sorority. I grouped them together because they're basically always together, except that Fiona dates Harris. They're cute and quirky, and for some reason obsessed with Froyo.
Froyo is still delivering.
They're also kind of ditzy, but Fiona gets kind of cool. She's pre-law and her mom is also a judge, but for some reason acts all girly and brainless. Anyway, that's it for the most prevalent characters. Let's move on to the relationships. Psych! Editing Nina here, so this video has turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, so I'm going to make it into 2 parts. So tune in next week if you want to see part 2, where I talk about the relationships and the spectacular conclusion to the show. Until then, head on over to my community tab where I've posted a poll about a potential future video because I really want to get some feedback on that. And as always, let me know of any shows that you want me to talk about because I need them. Give this video a like and a physical thumbs up and I'll see you later. And if you want to see me, subscribe. And turn on that bell if you want to get notified about part 2. Okay, bye! She then finds Jules. That's a tongue twister. I'm hungry. Eventually the two team up and they take this on. In episode 6, she's fed up with not being able to be with Tyler,